Hello my fellow weirdlings, it's Margot, and today I'm talking about something that's been on a lot of people's minds lately, a recently destroyed roadside attraction known as the Georgia Guidestones. So if you're ready to hear about the history, the conspiracies, the controversy, and the current criminal investigation, I have a lot to say, so keep watching. Confirmation bias is the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existent beliefs. This biased approach to decision-making is largely unintentional and often results in ignoring inconsistent information. If you find yourself having a knee-jerk reaction to this video because I'm exploring this topic from angles that differ from your preconceived opinions, I challenge you to listen anyway. You probably won't like everything I have to say, but that's okay. If you find yourself agreeing with anybody 100% of the time, you're probably not using enough of your critical thinking skills. The Georgia Guidestones were a roadside attraction located in Elberton, Georgia, about 100 miles east of Atlanta. The Guidestones have been referred to as a cross between Stonehenge and the Rosetta Stone, but to most they were really just an interesting art installation and a place to stop while on the way to other destinations. Then there's the small minority who saw the Guidestones as something far more sinister. We'll get into that in a minute. The curious attraction brought tourists to the area, the self-proclaimed granite capital of the world. The Guidestones drew about 20,000 visitors per year. Unfortunately, on July 6, 2022, the Georgia Guidestones were destroyed after being damaged by an explosion. The Georgia Guidestones were created under very mysterious circumstances, leaving a lot of room for speculation. Here's what we do know. In 1979, a mysterious man calling himself Robert C. Christian, or R.C. Christian, arrived at Elberton's granite cutting company called Elberton Granite Finishing. There, he spoke only to the company's president, Joe H. Fendley Sr. Christian informed Fendley that he was looking for a granite firm to execute his design for a monument that would serve as a compass, calendar, and clock. He also directed that it be capable of withstanding catastrophic events. The monument was to be inscribed with wisdom for the ages, suggestions that would lead humanity into an age of reason. These words were to be inscribed into granite blocks cut on an impressively large scale. Christian admitted to Fendley that R.C. Christian was a pseudonym, chosen because it represented his own beliefs and those of the organization that had planned and would be funding the project. The group Christian represented was purported to have planned the building of the Guidestones for 20 years and wished to remain anonymous. Christian claimed he'd chosen Elbert County because it was rural, had an abundant supply of granite, a relatively mild climate, and because some of his ancestors had once lived in the area. Fendley assumed Christian was, quote, a nut, so he tried to discourage him by giving a quote several times higher than any project the company had done before. He told Christian the job would require additional tools and consultants. Nonetheless, Christian accepted the quote. Money was no object. Christian provided Fendley with a scale model of the Guidestones and 10 pages of specifications. The only other known person in Elberton that met with R.C. Christian was Wyatt C. Martin, president of Granite City Bank, who acted as Christian's agent in Elberton, helping him procure a piece of land to build his monument on. Christian said he wanted the monument erected in a rural area, away from crowds and tourists. On October 1, 1979, Christian purchased 5 acres of cow pasture from farm owner Wayne Mullinex. Mullinex and his children were given lifetime cattle grazing rights on the site where the Guidestones were to stand. This site was located about 7 miles north of Elberton. Christian told Martin that he hoped other conservation-minded groups would later build even more statues to form an outer ring around the central structure. With the building site ready, Fendley put his laborers to work. They built a structure that consisted of 4 massive blue granite slabs, 16 feet in height, 1 center stone, known as the Gnomon Stone, and a capstone. Once completed, the structure weighed 119 tons, consisting of 951 cubic feet of granite. Sandblasted into the granite were more than 4,000 letters and characters, each averaging about 4 inches in height. The Guidestones were revealed to the public on March 22, 1980, before an audience of a few hundred people, though audience estimates vary, and soon began to attract visitors from all over the world. Christian later gifted the monument and the land it stood on to Elbert County, in the hope that they'd protect the Guidestones. The deed of ownership forbade charging a fee to visit the Guidestones and the construction of permanent buildings on the property. To this day, the true identity of R.C. Christian and the organization he represented remain a mystery. Joe Fendley took that information to his grave in 2005. Later, when asked about Mr. Christian, Wyatt Martin said, "He told me if you were to tell who put the money up for this, it wouldn't be a mystery anymore, and no one would come and read it." That had to be a part of the attraction, to get people to come and read his 10 rules that he came up with. Martin vowed to take Christian's secrets to the grave, and he did in 2021. All documents connected to the Guidestones' purchase and creation were reportedly destroyed after it was built. So let's take a look at the Guidestones and why some consider them controversial. The 4 vertical granite slabs that made up the Guidestones were inscribed front and back with Christian's 10 principles. Each side contained all 10 principles, written in a different modern language. Moving clockwise around the stones were English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. While the capstone was inscribed with alphabets from ancient civilizations, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Babylonian cuneiform, Sanskrit, and classical Greek. In each of these languages was written, "Let these be Guidestones to an age of reason." The Guidestones were positioned in an X with each line of the axis oriented toward specific areas of the moon's perceived annual rotation around the Earth. The 4 large upright granite slabs were oriented to the limits of the moon's migration during the course of the year. An eye-level oblique hole was drilled in the gnomon stone upward toward the sky and oriented toward the North Star. In the middle of the gnomon stone was a large slot with a hole cut through the granite, orienting the Guidestones with summer and winter solstices. The Guidestones also functioned as a large sundial. Drilled through the capstone was a 7/8 inch hole, which allowed sunlight to shine on the southern face of the gnomon stone at noon. The 10 principles inscribed in the granite slabs, more specifically the first 2, have been a source of controversy, especially in recent years. All of them seem to be open to interpretation. According to the Guidestones, the principles were offered to ensure humankind's future survival. Number 1. Maintain humanity under 500 million, in perpetual balance with nature. Number 2. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Number 3. Unite humanity with a living new language. Number 4. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Number 5. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Number 6. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Number 7. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Number 8. Balance personal rights with social duties. Number 9. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. And number 10. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Some have interpreted the first 2 principles, which suggest limiting human population to 500 million and guiding reproduction wisely, as a call for genocide. To put that into perspective, that would be less than 10% of today's population. But if this advice was meant to be taken by survivors after an apocalypse, how many people would you actually expect to survive? You'd probably be working your way back up to a population of 500 million. Guiding reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, just sounds like some ableist bullshit to me. But if genetic disorders can survive the apocalypse, I doubt those of us with them really need to worry about what a few yahoos that write on rocks and cow pastures have to say about it. The environmental stuff makes sense, at least. Well, once the radiation got cleared up, I suppose. Now keep in mind that when the Georgia Guidestones were built, in 1979 to 1980, Cold War paranoia was very real. There were a lot of people expecting the end of the world via nuclear war. This had been building for decades, since the end of the Second World War. And that paranoia is still alive and well today, in the minds of a certain subset of American people. That's made very obvious by the mere fact that anyone can feel so threatened by some hippie carvings on some rocks that they'd feel the need to blow them up. And to those people who've called the Guidestones the 10 Commandments of the Antichrist or Satanic Stonehenge, what on earth would anything on these stones have to do with Satanism? If you're that afraid of something, you should at least take the time to figure out what it even is. What I see when looking at these stones is random generic new agey post-apocalyptic nonsense. It was a fun roadside attraction and it wasn't hurting anybody. It was a piece of artwork, open to interpretation. If you think these rocks had any power to threaten humankind or your religion, you need professional help. I'm not saying that jokingly. All of the Satan talk had previously led to at least 3 separate occasions of vandalism of the Guidestones by religious groups. Now, I'm pretty sure that Christians would view it as a hate crime or something if someone was going around vandalizing or blowing up all of their crosses. I guess somebody should have added a stone with the golden rule on it. So while we're here, what is Satanism really? From my personal observations, Satanism is anything Christians are afraid of, don't understand, or disagree with for political reasons. Satan has been used as a Christian scapegoat throughout history. If evangelical Christians want to end Satanism as they claim, they have only to put an end to Christianity. The difference here is nobody's trying to force them to. And if you're not the sort of Christian that wants to destroy anything you don't understand, this isn't addressed to you. We all know the overzealous Christians I'm talking about. And you, reasonable Christians, should be getting more fed up with them than the rest of us. They seem to be trying to give you all a bad name. Another piece to the Guidestone mystery is the missing time capsule. A granite marker located near the monument read, "Placed 6 feet below this spot on, and to be opened on." The marker claimed it was placed on the site in 1982 and seemed to hint at a time capsule buried below, though the dates of when the capsule was placed and when it should be opened were conspicuously left blank. After the recent destruction of the Guidestones, the Elbert County Road Department crew dug 6 feet below the marker and found nothing. So who put the marker there and why? We'll probably never know. By the way, if you saw the post going around about the time capsule being opened and containing a Burt Reynolds Playboy magazine, a Saturday Night Fever 8-track tape, a Peterbilt emblem, and thousands of Quaaludes, that was a joke. I've actually seen a lot of people sharing it as true. Now let's get into some of the conspiracy theories. First off, I'm seeing a lot of New World Order talk again. If you're somebody who believes in this, please research the origins of this theory. It's rooted in anti-Semitism, not to mention blatant fear-mongering. I'm not going to go deep into that today, though. The New World Order, or NWO, is a conspiracy theory that hypothesizes a secretly emerging, totalitarian world government. Many who believe in the New World Order theory believe a cabal of elites is working behind the scenes to orchestrate global events to enslave the global populace. Thanks to social media and the likes of QAnon, lots of people now believe every real tragedy or actual real-life conspiracy is staged, while believing in completely unfounded scenarios concocted to keep them paranoid, and sow civil unrest aimed in all the wrong directions. This is where the confirmation bias really rears its ugly head, and it's become an ever-worsening problem over the past decade. Of course, the NWO theory adherents choose to believe the Georgia Guidestones were a guide for the New World Order to take shape. It's quite possible proponents of the NWO theory destroyed the Georgia Guidestones in what has now been deemed an act of domestic terrorism. It wouldn't be the first time they felt inspired to do something like that. In 2016, 2 men were arrested for stockpiling weapons in preparation to attack HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. These men were convinced that the government-funded HAARP facility controlled the weather, preventing Americans from talking to God, and was complicit in making sacrifices for the NWO cabal. In another incident in 2018, a man was arrested for planning to blow up what he believed to be a satanic temple monument in order to make America aware of an impending New World Order. NWO theory adherents genuinely seem to believe that they're pushed to act in self-defense. I'm interested in conspiracy theories, and I'd like to do more videos on them, but I always speak about them very carefully on this channel. It's a real concern these days that someone may take something way too seriously or read too much into it and try to hurt themselves or others. I know Americans are always worried about losing their right to free speech, but would it really hurt for each of us to try to be more responsible for what we say? There's nothing wrong with enjoying a mystery or even working to solve it, but when people become consumed with unfounded conspiracy theories, that's when things get sketchy. In recent years, the Georgia Guidestones became a recurring symbol in the QAnon conspiracy movement, which baselessly linked them to the COVID pandemic and a fictional cabal of sex traffickers. During the time, the monument was repeatedly vandalized by those who saw it as a guide for the New World Order. Some of the graffiti has said things like God is stronger than the NWO. Let's take a look at some of the other theories about the Georgia Guidestones. It's often been noted that the area R.C. Christian chose to place the monument isn't far from Hartwell, Georgia, which the Cherokee called Al-Ye-Li Alohi, or the center of the world. Trails once radiated in all directions from this hub, so it makes sense that it would have been the center of the world to the local Cherokee. Hartwell even boasts an historical marker and stone monument that declare it to be the center of the world. Other spots in the U.S. boast the same distinction, though, including centers of the world in California and Ohio. Because of its proximity to Hartwell, many claim the Guidestones were built on a sacred place to Native Americans. They cite that the Hopi and their ancient shamans say signs will foretell the time when the Fifth World, a new age, will begin. This also means the end of our current world. They also cite that ancient prophecies noted that when stone tablets are returned to the center of the world, the new age will begin. Another theory that I came across was from an interview with writer and computer industry analyst Van Smith, who said that encoded within the dimensions of the stones is the height and feet of Dubai's Burj Khalifa, now the world's tallest building. To him, that suggested the builders knew of plans to build a new Tower of Babel, ushering in the dawning of a new era in which man can become God. He's quoted as saying, "I'm not a conspiracy lunatic who spends all my time researching Freemasonry and things like that, but this evidence is extremely real, and it's disturbing." While some religious scholars have compared the Burj Khalifa to the Tower of Babel, I feel like this is all a bit of a stretch. One theory is that the Guidestones were commissioned by white supremacists and that they contain a race war message intended to be a warning to all other national groups that the earth needs consolidation. Just repeating the next theory will probably kill off some of my brain cells, but there are people who believe that the current pandemic is the result of the first principle on the monument, stating that the world population should be limited to 500 million. Interestingly, these are the same people who tend to believe the pandemic isn't real. So how would this even work? This obviously false claim originated from Facebook and is apparently popular with the New World Order crowd. Since the Guidestones were supposedly meant to survive a global apocalypse, some conspiracy theories actually had a date in mind, October 3rd, 2014. This was said to be the date of the global apocalypse, and the stones were supposedly intended to aid survivors in regulating a new world. To me, it seems kind of doubtful that they'd be of much use after a global catastrophe, since they couldn't even survive a bomb. But I guess the 2014 apocalypse was canceled or rescheduled anyway. You may recall October 3rd, 2014 was a day that a lot of religious zealots were convinced was going to be the rapture, some even going so far as giving away all of their belongings. For those unfamiliar, the rapture is a theory held by some Christians, particularly within branches of American evangelicalism, consisting of an end-time event when all Christian believers who are alive, along with resurrected believers, will rise in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. I couldn't even make this up, but apparently somebody did. One particular local minister believed that the stones were designed for worship of the sun or the devil. I guess those must be interchangeable. This minister believed that since the stones attracted many UFO enthusiasts, New Age folk, and modern pagans, it must have been built as an intended place to worship all things evil. I'd love for anyone to explain to me how something can be theorized to be used to worship the devil by people who don't even believe in the devil. The next conspiracy theory claims that the Guidestones were built on a power nexus, a large center of power. The core power that's said to be hidden from the rest of the world was supposed to eventually be released at an unknown date and apparently end the world or something. and this final theory states that the Guidestones were intended to convey psychic messages. Believers of this theory were convinced they must point their arms at the monument, one palm up and one palm down, in order to receive psychic messages directly from the stones. But I also need to give an honorable mention to the bizarre and convoluted theories of Georgia's recent gubernatorial candidate, Candace Taylor, who finished third with only 3.4% of the vote in May's Republican gubernatorial primary. During Taylor's run for office, she connected the monument to her distrust of the COVID vaccine, abortion as demonic worship, and the New World Order conspiracy theory. Taylor had listed destroying the Guidestones as one of her top 10 priorities during her campaign, describing them as evil and satanic. Why? Because it's not specifically Christian, even though it probably actually was commissioned by Christians. I guess this is what happens when Christians become afraid of their own monuments. It's absolutely bizarre. I mean, the Bible advocates for worse than the Guidestones did. The conspiracy theorist in me feels that it seems like the sort of thing Christians have written in the past. In 2005, an online conspiracy theorist, using the pseudonym John Connor, super original, felt the need to warn the public about the evils of the Georgia Guidestones. He wrote on his website, "The Guidestones should be smashed into 1,000,000 pieces and then the rubble used for a construction project. The Guidestones have a deep satanic origin and message." Again, super original. 17 years later, John Connor is now known as right-wing YouTuber Mark Dice, and he's still completely unoriginal. Dice has spread false claims about the results of the 2020 presidential election and the 9/11 attacks. He told NBC News, "In 2005, when I said they should be taken down, I clearly meant through the proper legal civic channels," echoing many of the locals who were opposed to the monument being erected in the first place. Dice's theory, though he clearly has a veracity problem, is that the Guidestones were built by a 500-year-old secret society known as the Order of the Rosy Cross. They're one of those sects similar to the Illuminati who kind of get credit for anything mysterious as far as conspiracy theorists are concerned. And then there are the conspiracy theories about R.C. Christian's real identity. The most enduring theory is that Christian was in actuality television producer, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and founder of CNN, Ted Turner, or a combination of Ted Turner and a man named Robert Carter Cook. Honestly, this conspiracy theory makes a lot more sense than the rest of them. I won't go too far into this today because this video will just be way too long, but conspiracy theorists and locals alike think there's a pretty decent chance Ted Turner could actually be R.C. Christian. One anonymous local is quoted as saying, "The rumor here is that Ted Turner built them. Jives with a lot of his beliefs, his big money, and his absolutely zany personality. Turner also has made his home in Atlanta and fits the description of the man Fendley and Martin spoke to. There may also be a connection to the Freemasons. From everything I've read, that's really not outside of the realm of possibility. For one thing, nearly every person who participated in the building of the monument was said to have been Freemasons. But that makes sense because most of them would have also been Masons by trade." Mark Clamp, caretaker of the monument and son of Charlie Clamp, who helped carve the stones, is quoted as saying in an interview that virtually every hand that touched the Guidestones during its construction belonged to a Freemason. One thing that goes against the idea of Ted Turner being R.C. Christian is that banker Wyatt Martin claimed to have known that the mystery man is actually now dead, stating that the man's son had contacted him to let him know of his passing. Ted Turner is still alive. On Wednesday, July 6, 2022, the Georgia Guidestones were partially destroyed by an explosive device. The rest of the monument was fully dismantled later the same day, reportedly for safety reasons. Online conspiracy theorists claimed that the stones were struck down as an act of God. However, Georgia prosecutor Parks White and the wireless security cameras that had been present at the scene since a previous incident of vandalism in 2014 defined it as an act of domestic terrorism. White said the destruction of a public building by explosive is inherently intended to influence the actions of the governing authority that owns the structure. He added, the use of violence to sway or alter the behavior of any government agency is terrorism. Christopher Cubis, Executive Vice President of the Elberton Granite Association, said, "I really hate that this happened. I do think it's an attack on free speech, and I hate that we've gotten to this point in our country where nothing can be out there for people to read without somebody trying to destroy it." Elberton Mayor Daniel Graves said, "It's not part of a vast conspiracy theory. It's not intended to spread hate or anything evil. This is a celebration of the men and women that work so hard in our stone industry and what it means to this community. It's the lifeblood. We're the granite capital of the world, and it's something we're extremely proud of." He went on to say, "We're heartbroken but still so grateful. There are so many communities that have experienced such serious loss in the last several weeks. We're grateful that we're only mourning the loss of stone, and some of the others have lost so much more." He also said, "We're not running out of stone anytime soon, so I'm confident that one thing we can do is fix a monument." At the time of this recording, there's been no official statement on whether they actually do intend to rebuild the monument. Also at this time, authorities haven't identified any suspects in the bombing. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation is looking into it. As far as I can tell, the people of Elberton, Georgia in general were pretty okay with the Guidestones. There are a lot of news articles from 2010 where the locals were discussing celebrating the Guidestones' 30th anniversary and how they were really hesitant due to recent vandalism and negative attention from conspiracy theorists and religious extremists. Then Elbert County Chamber of Commerce President Phyllis Brooks said, "There are a lot of people who don't feel about it the same way we do." She also said that most in Elberton viewed the stones as a work of art that drew tourists. Anne said, "We don't get wrapped up so much in what they say, but they do still have a draw to a different sector of people." She added, "With the damage that had been done to the Guidestones and a lot of things that were out there on YouTube, it was just decided that maybe we might wait for another year to do it." Mark Clamp, the monument's caretaker, is quoted as saying, "I know the men who put this up, and they were all good men. My father was one of those men. If this had been anything satanic or demonic, they never would have had anything to do with it." Recently, when a local minister tried to convince the town to remove the Guidestones, the county's attorney Bill Daughtry responded, "I've never known anybody other than Candace Taylor to consider this a statement of faith. It's just a bunch of nonsense chiseled in stone." Daughtry said no one objected to the Georgia Guidestones as a religious monument until Taylor ran for governor. Residents said they viewed the stones as a fun piece of local lore. Elberton resident and restaurant operator George Bond said, after the stone's destruction, "We came out here as kids. We would sneak a beer and hang out at the weird Southern Gothic architecture, and that's it. There's been nothing out here as long as I can remember bad or satanic or evil. It's just a hokey little gimmick out in a little town. It was terrible that somebody blew it up. A little town don't need to spend any money fixing it." Another local resident, Jack Patel, estimated that about a third of his customers at the Quick Mart and Cafe were tourists visiting the monument. He'd never heard of anyone expressing a problem with the stones. He said, "You'd just go take a walk, read the blocks, take a picture. A lot of people come in on the weekends to see the Guidestones." What does remain is the Elberton Granite Museum, which contains a book that R.C. Christian left behind, called Common Sense Renewed. Aside from the points that were listed on the Guidestones, the concerns he mentions in this book sound like they're straight out of a Republican politician's platform: growing entitlement spending, stifling regulation, and the breakdown of the traditional family. But he was also concerned that the world's problems were from overpopulation turning civilization into an atomic tinderbox. He felt this required some limited form of world government to save mankind from annihilation. The museum also still contains the scale model of the Guidestones, a short film detailing its construction, and brochures about the Guidestones' creation. I personally don't particularly feel strongly about the Georgia Guidestones one way or another, but it's the principle of the thing, that there are actually people in this country who constantly preach about the importance of their personal freedoms, yet think it's perfectly reasonable to want to literally blow up an inanimate object simply because they perceive it to represent a religion other than their own. Even if the Guidestones were satanic, so what? Freedom of religion means all religions, not just Christianity, and Satanism has established itself as a recognized religion. Either you believe in religious freedom or you don't. That's all I have for you today. I hope you found this topic interesting and will come back for more. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and bring your friends, family, COVID pod, cult members, invisible friends, or enemies. And if you have an opinion on this, leave it in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.